Good morning. It's nice to be here. It's actually nice to see so many familiar faces as well. So I got approached by Kerry Pinney, who's wandering around with a camera this morning, I believe, and she asked me to come and speak about people rather than digital. So that's what I'm going to do. A little bit of a story to start with. He said, use this because it will work. But never mind. This year I moved house. I used to live in Yorkshire, and I've recently moved to the Midlands. And this will come through several threads as I speak this morning. I like kitchen gardens, and when we moved, the house was in excellent shape. The garden less so. So this spring I've spent an awful lot of time going through the garden and ripping things out, moving several tons of topsoil and doing an awful lot of work. This is the before and the after. As you can see, there's raised beds and sheds. Everybody should have a shed. I love sheds. Always wanted a shed, and now I've got two. And on my Amazon wish list, there is possibly a third that my wife keeps going, I don't think so. But it's a lot of work when you start doing this sort of thing. And now I've put a picture up of rhubarb. And everybody's going, have we come to the rehearsals of Gardener's Question Time? Bear with me. Does anybody know what this is? Okay, I admit I gave you a clue. So, as I said before, I used to live in Yorkshire, just outside this little pink triangle. Does anybody know what that is? That's right, it's the Rhubarb Triangle. In my old garden, I had a couple of rhubarb plants, and I brought them with me. Now, when you actually go to the Rhubarb Triangle in Yorkshire, you'd expect perhaps to go and see huge fields full of rhubarb as the Yorkshire vista spreads out before you and all these rhubarb plants. What you actually see are these sheds, and this is what you get in the Yorkshire Triangle. You get lots and lots of sheds. And what's going on in here is a thing called forced rhubarb. Does anybody know what forced rhubarb is? Yeah, that's right. So forced rhubarb, it spends a couple of years out in the fields without being harvested. It's planted, it's left, the energy that it absorbs from the sun turned into carbohydrates, and then the 3rd November, after it's been planted in the fields, it's all taken up and it's put into the sheds in the ground, usually after the first frost, which is August in Yorkshire, and they're moved into sheds and they're kept in complete darkness. And in that darkness and in the warmth, they start to grow. They start to use the stored carbohydrate, turning it into glucose, and they start to grow. And what happens is you get these wonderful, long, thin, smooth, very smooth, no ridges on the rhubarb, stalks. And it's really sweet and really sour. And it's really sought after. It's not a huge crop. And it is PDO, which I can never remember what it stands for. So forced rhubarb can only be grown in Yorkshire, apparently, while we're inside the European Union. And without daylight, you get these wonderful bits of rhubarb. And that's what they're doing here. And traditionally, the rhubarb pickers in Yorkshire will harvest the rhubarb by candlelight. Because any exposure to strong light will also stop the growth. It will actually stop it because it thinks, oh no, hang on, no, I'm growing at the wrong time. And by the end of the March, the season's completely over. The season is completely over now for rhubarb. The root of the rhubarb is completely also spent. So those of you who've got rhubarb in your garden, how many people have got rhubarb? Yeah. So you know that it just keeps coming back. And I know some people have got allotments here. But by the end of March, this rhubarb is completely gone. And the only thing that you can do with what you've got left is actually rip it out and compost it. It is that completely denuded of energy. My rhubarb's moved a few times now, and There we go. My rhubarb has actually been moved a lot. Originally it came from my mother-in-law in Bedford. It went to Yorkshire, and now it's in the ground in, I live just outside Tamworth in a small village. I'm not even going to pronounce it, but I live in the Midlands, and the rhubarb's coming through again. So what's the point of that? Yeah, I know. Bear with me. I'm talking about people. So we've taken at Jisc around about 180 people now through a Digital Leaders program, some form of iteration of that. We've done some pilots, we've run some paid-for courses now, and I've just literally come down last night from the latest course which we ran in Manchester, which was on Tuesday and Wednesday this week. And it's been really interesting. We've had a huge amount of people on the course, and they've been very diverse. It's really nice to see in this photograph heads of student services, a head of IT from the University of Gibraltar, and somebody from Belfast Metropolitan College, as well as James Clay. That sounded really wrong, didn't it? James is a nice guy. But we've taken these people through the course, and we've been talking an awful lot about what digital means. And when we started on the course, we used to get an awful lot of people come on the course, and they would say, what are the tools that I need to do? What are the things that I need to do to be a digital leader? I need a list. Give me a list of things that I need to do so that I can turn around to my boss, to my Vice-Chancellor and say, yes, I am now digital. I need to be told what it is and how I should look so that I can make the university look like that. And we get that an awful lot. This is what digital looks like, I've been told. You know, people want to know what the organisation should look like. And some people come on the course thinking that that's what a digital organisation looks like. We take a technology-centric view. When people say to us, we need you to do digital, this is what people sometimes think about. And we can say all the things like, well, we've got student-centred and things like that. But actually, in our minds, when somebody says to us, go do digital, sometimes we just think that that's what we need to do. And that's what we get from some of the leaders who come on the course. I've been involved in the Change in Learning Landscape programme, which sadly is not running anymore. It's a multi-agency programme. Is anybody involved in that? Change in Learning Landscape? So we worked with an awful lot of people, and we had an awful lot of lessons, and we did some good interventions, some good project interventions in those institutions. And we learned an awful lot about individual interventions, but we also learned a lot about strategy. One of the key things that we learned about strategy was that there's a disconnect between strategy and practice. The BBC are here. I didn't know, and I've not had makeup put on. Today, thank you. But this disconnect between strategy and practice does present a barrier. When senior staff put things like excellent student experience, I should have actually had a bingo sheet for this, shouldn't I? Personalised learning, yeah. Resilience. This is an actual quote from a strategy that I read. We attract students through our teaching vibrancy. Yeah, do these ring true with things that might be in a strategy? Well, yes. We found these terms were problematic on that programme. These were problematic. Not for the people writing the strategies, because it's quite nice to actually put that sort of statement in. It was problematic for staff at the front end, for practitioners, for people who had a massive teaching load or research load, or professional services, for you guys. So how many people are IT directors here? How do you interpret teaching vibrancy? Yeah? Yeah. It becomes a problem, and it actually creates a barrier between what the vision of the institution is and what the practice is. Not the actual strategy. The strategy is the bit in between what the institution, the vision is, you know, where you want to go, and the practice. And that became really obvious. And when we do that with digital now, Because one of the things that people who have been coming on our leaders course has been telling us is, well, one of the things that I need to do is I've been told to write a digital strategy. Yeah? So those were all things that were in the student experience strategy. What happens when you start saying, well, we've got the student experience strategy, now we've got to have the digital strategy? What does that look like? And when we discuss it with them, there's an awful lot of difference. And it becomes really apparent that they see digital as something that you do to somebody. Yeah? It becomes something that you have to, well, if we're going to have a digital strategy, it usually means involving tools, and it means that we are going to impose, or there's going to be something that makes something happen. Not everywhere, and I know that there's probably some really good digital strategies in this room that people are sort of taking forward and actually really making an impact with. And we all know that there's a huge benefit to the use of technology across the sector. I don't think anybody in the room is going to argue with that. But when we start talking about the strategy in terms of tools and technologies and all of those things, we have a problem, because we all know that when we apply digital in our organisations, it's actually about change. None of this is actually about technology. All of this is about change and change management, and change management is actually about culture. And culture, at an individual level or an organisational level, is actually about people. So what we do on the course is we take them through a process. One delegate came on the course and she asked the question, why am I here? And it became apparent that she had been sent on the course and she wanted a list of things. She actually said to us on the end of day... Is that me? On the end of day one, give me a list of things that I should do. It's all I need. Give me a list of things that I can go away and do. She didn't get it at all. We take the delegates through a mapping process, and some of you will be familiar with some of the techniques that we use. This one that you can see here is the visitor and resident mapping, but we also have a couple of other things. We map a variety of different things, but all of it is based around practice. It's all around the practice that people have. And it was at the point when we started taking people through that practice and situating digital in the things that they wanted to do that she reached her own tipping point, and she started to ask, so if I want to do this in what I do, and this person was in a medical school, and yes, she taught, not very much, but she was doing an awful lot of research, and somebody had said, oh, and for the school, you're going to write the digital strategy, as that often happens. It also became apparent she didn't actually go and speak to anybody in the technology enhanced learning team or anybody in the IT team, but she'd been told to go away and write the digital strategy. And she came on the course and she started mapping and actually looking at what her own practice was. When she started doing the things that she does every day, the teaching, the marking, when she started looking at what she did in research, which, in all honesty, was her passion. Her passion was her research. And she started looking at those individual practices, how she worked, who she worked with, how she collaborated, how much time her email was taking. That's when she started finding her own reasons to do digital. Nothing to do with the tools, nothing to do with anything that we were talking about around the specifics of what her job could be when it meant to doing the digital strategy. She started to find her own way. This is a picture of me. This is my office, my old office. I've been involved in around 200 Jisc, LFHE and LTSN technology projects. Who remembers the LTSN? Oh, good. All of the projects that I've been involved in have involved technology, and I think that every single project that I've worked on that has been successful, and I've had an awful lot of failures, have actually looked at the culture of an organisation. I've put this one up for a reason, which is the reason that I moved from Yorkshire to the Midlands is that I work from home. My wife doesn't. She worked in a Russell Group institution in the north. You can work it out. And then she moved to a post-92 institution in the south, in the Midlands, doing the same job, bit of promotion, slightly better terms and conditions. She's now on an academic contract instead of a professional services contract. That's another debate. But when she started working there, she went into the office and she came home and she said, they want me to do this thing called location-independent working. And I looked at her and I went, really? And location-independent working, and I was like, but that's a project that I had in that university 8 years ago, which is great. It's a really, I felt that was a really positive thing. And she gave me the policy, and I looked at the policy, and there was no mention of Jisc in it. And I was like, oh, gutted. But it was a project that we had, a project that I was responsible for, and 8 years on, it's actually spread all the way across the university. It was only in one school when we first did it. But when I read the policy, it was wonderful. This location-independent working project that Jisc had funded, where we looked at all the technology barriers to working independently from location. I'm not going to call it working from home. Working, location-independent working. All of it was there. All of it was all the enablers that were in place for that university to do that. There was no mention of technology. Not a single mention in the policy document that she'd brought home mentioned technology. It just said, you will be given appropriate equipment to do the job that you need to do. It's just there. And it was assumed that, well, of course you'll have a laptop, of course it will tether to the phone, and of course that's going to happen. The only mention of technology, really, in any depth, was the workstation assessment that she needed to do when she was working at home, that she had to do herself. But all of that was just in place. And they'd addressed all of the cultural barriers, all of the things that they needed to do. It addressed things like line management, how to stay in touch with the office, how to actually behave, all of those things that it's a technology thing, but actually they'd addressed all the cultural things. It was really nice. And I read it, and it was great. And I think that some of the bits and paragraphs in there that I possibly wrote, no mention of Jisc, I'm just saying. But it was a really good project. 8 years on, I'm actually reaping the benefits of it. So things like that do happen. They're successful projects. They address the culture. The projects that I've seen fail are the ones where we force digital, where you force digital into something. You leverage it into practice, you know, where we don't actually address the culture. For those of you that have heard me talk about this in the past, it's about the dead bird projects. Yeah, those projects where, you know, you go, you do a whole fantastic project in the institution, you turn up on the institution, and they've got this presentation that they give to you, and they give to all the senior managers in there, you know, let's say it's the use of iPads in the classroom to do assessment in something, and they do the presentation, and the Vice-Chancellor goes, well, that's lovely, that's really, really good, and thank you for that, and the team's really pleased, and the Vice-Chancellor goes and walks out, and effectively he's got that look on his face that said, my cat has just brought me a dead bird, I put it in a plastic bag, somebody distract it while I put it in the bin. It's a dead bird project. It didn't work because nobody addressed the culture. It was just about leveraging in the technology. The common thread when we work with the project teams or the digital leaders on the digital leaders courses is that at some point the success comes when we address the culture, when we recognize that change doesn't come by forcing the technology. It's about actually putting in place all of those things that underpin the things that you want to change. It's about addressing all of the cultural barriers that are there. And most of you know this. The problem comes is when people then tell you, you need this technique. The students want lecture capture. Go do it. But actually, they don't give you the tools, and they don't give you the opportunity to address the cultural things that you need to address. When we force the technology, it's like forced rhubarb. Tastes good, but the season's short. You can put everything in place, and you can go and say, right, that's fantastic. We've put lecture capture in 5 lecture theatres, but nobody's using it. And we had this week a whole group of the leaders telling us that we've put lecture capture into all of these places, but in the first semester, all the students are going and looking at those lectures. But in the second semester, and the first semester of the second year, and the second semester of the second year, the clicks are sort of fallen off a cliff, and nobody's looking at them. Nobody's finding a reason to go and use those recorded lectures. And it's because it's a technology that's been put there and nobody's put any thought into the pedagogical underpinning or the cultural change that needs to come, and the technology is just there for them to sort of plug and play, but nobody is saying, this is how you use it in your teaching. This is how we change the culture of teaching at the institution. So when we force it in that way, and we just sort of put it all in, and all of our energy and all of our funding and all of our meetings and projects are focused on this idea of, there's the technology, go do it, all of that energy is just wasted 2 or 3 or 6 months after the project is finished. And it usually is a project. We do this by project and not by a sustained method. If you want digital change, then you need to get the people to change. And people need to be at the centre of that strategy, rather than, we are going to have digital and we're going to do it. We're going to have lecture capture, go put the technology in place. You've got to put the people at the centre of that. Understand what they do, who they are, and what they want out of the technology. How many people have done a user needs analysis before you've actually done the project? Oh, come on. Yeah, okay. So who are the users that you addressed? And I don't want to sort of embarrass or trick people, but you often do the lecturers. Stakeholders, yeah? And even that terminology becomes a problem, doesn't it? When we call them stakeholders and users, aren't they just people? Stop calling them users. These are people that are coming on a course.
Stop calling them students.
Yeah.
Call them by their names.
Yeah, but these are people with actual real emotions. And one of the things about users, and you know, I'm picking on the term users, but users is a particular thing for me, because it feels like, you know, we're dehumanizing what they want to do. These are people that are coming to learn in institutions or do research. And you know, we need to look at their practice and talk about what it is that they do, rather than thinking of them of this homogenous group as well. So I don't want to sort of, you know, it'd be great to sort of have these discussions further about what that might be, but some of you in the room are going to be UX specialists. And I love the term user experience, but I think really, you know, the techniques that we use aren't actually about users. They're about actually putting people at the centre of things and trying to focus on that. For me, the whole thing around digital now, having spoken to so many people in institutions and worked with so many colleges, universities, and especially working with some of the people on the Leaders course who don't have responsibility for digital. A lot of the people that come on the Leaders course that we've worked with, yes, we get some really good IT directors and we learn an awful lot of, you know, we love having IT directors on the course because it's great to put them next to the person who's responsible for, we had an estates manager recently. So having an IT director and an estates manager and 2 directors of academic practice on the last course all sat talking to each other going, oh, that's why you do that. There's an awful lot of learning from that. But we need to create the space for digital to actually grow in the mind of the people that we work with, so that the conditions occur for that actual change to happen in their own practice. Digital is as much there for the students and teachers and researchers as it also is for the people in estates, for the people in catering, for the people who run the conference centres. All of these things go to make up this holistic, what does digital look like at your institution? How many people include what digital looks like with the catering staff, with the estates staff, with all of those people that can actually tweet about the institution? One of the institutions we worked with, we found that there was a chef that was tweeting out every day what was being sold at the Students' Union. That's part of the institutional digital story. You know, it's about a person saying, this is what I cooked today for the students. So all of these things are about the digital change, and at the centre of that, it's about culture. Change doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it's also continual as well. The rhubarb that I planted 15 years ago is actually still going very strong. I've moved it, I've had to feed it, I've had to tend it, I've split it. I've got several plants now. For those of you who've got allotments, you can have one of my rhubarb plants if you so desire. But the digital strategies that you put in place need to be that kind of rhubarb. It needs to be the kind that you put in the ground and you tend and you feed it year after year. It's no good trying to turn your digital strategy into forced rhubarb, where you get this wonderful sweet and sour thing that comes up, but you only get it ever so small. You can only use it at the end of March. It's no good trying to sort of force it and have that as your flagship digital thing that you highlight to people, because the season is really short and it's not sustainable. That's my time, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, we've got 5 minutes. Brilliant, thanks very much, Lawrie, for some
That's
very
me.
interesting thoughts there. We have 5 minutes for questions, so we have 2 microphones going around, so if anyone would like to make a comment or question?
Can one of them be, can the air conditioning go on? There are no questions.
No questions, no comments. I'm amazed. Oh, go on.
Not really a question directly, but it's something you might want to comment on. We had a problem recently with our shared drives across the institution that everyone has, and I was asked to do some comms out to the student body. So we sent people out to the computer rooms and let me know there's a problem, save your work, you know, just keep your work safe. And everyone just looked at us and shrugged their shoulders. And every single student said, we don't use the shared drive that you provide. So I went back to the IT team that was looking after this and trying to resolve the problem and gave them the good news.
But
And actually, the good news is none of the students are using the thing that you provide and you think is really important to them. So I just put that there as an anecdote if you would like to comment on it.
Yeah, because we didn't listen to the people. Yeah.
Okay. No more comments or questions? That's brilliant. Thanks very much, Lawrie. Oh, one more, sorry. Okay. Is there a question with the bar?
How do you, I mean, given your comment about estates and IT and whatever, the implication is that digital strategy doesn't sit with a particular functional area. How do you make it a cross-institutional thing?
Do you know, man, I hate that question. Who's got responsibility for their digital strategy? Okay. Who's a TEL manager? What's your job title?
Head of digital services.
Yeah, you know, I don't have the answer to it. It sits with so many people. And an institution I was working with recently, they'd devolved the digital part of the strategy to the heads of department. What's your digital strategy going to be in your department? So they've actually, you know, so I don't know. And I don't have an answer to it other than, why have we got a digital strategy anyway? You know, did we have a, you know, why? What's it for? What is digital? Is a bigger question. You know, isn't it everything that we do now? Isn't it mad not to incorporate digital into the student experience strategy? Is it, you know, elements of the, you know, if there was somebody responsible for the digital strategy, I would say to them, excellent, don't write the strategy, put it into everybody else's. That would be my advice, and that's what I'd love to see. You know, but wouldn't it be great if we sort of reduced all the number of strategies that we had as well? Sorry, there's one.
Okay, 1 minute for one quick question, sir. About 1 minute left, I think.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that because in my head, isn't a digital strategy more about how do we educate everyone on thinking digital, like sort of understanding the digital landscape, what's available, right, getting ideas. And in my head, that's what the digital strategy would be for us, is not let's get all this technology in place, but how do we build confidence that people are just thinking about it. You know, when they teach, they think, what technology can I use to do this? Or I've got this problem, how do I overcome it using technology?
It's having that in place, isn't it? It's having, you know, it's having the ground prepared. It's having fertile ground that you can actually, when you say you're going to teach this module, and they look at the ground, they say, oh yeah, if I plant it here, something digital is going to pop up. You know, it's making sure that all the staff have got something there, all the knowledge and tools that they need to make an informed choice. But it's not, for me, it's not about sort of mandating. One of the things that I'm really scared of, and I know that some of you knew me in my previous role as at TechDis, which was all about disability. And one of the things that I have about mandating a standard is that you will all meet it. But usually that means that you reach the lowest common denominator. If you set the bar low enough that everybody can reach it, and I hate that. You know, I want lots of variety and I want lots of things to grow. If you set the bar low enough, people will always meet it. You know, when we say the minimum standard for our digital strategy is everybody's going to have a presence in the VLE, everybody will have a presence in the VLE, but that will be the standard that most of the people reach. And that terrifies me. You know, I want there to be lots of variety, and I want people to do as much as they can and feeling able to do as much as they can. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks again for Lawrie. That's very, very interesting.